2 days ago, the world watched Alex Eala lift a trophy under the slate-gray skies of Birmingham. 2 days ago, the confetti fell, the cameras flashed, and the narrative of a young, ascending superstar was written in bold ink across the landscape of professional tennis. But the beautiful, brutal reality of the WTA Tour is that it operates with absolute amnesia. The tour does not care about what you did on Sunday. By Tuesday morning, that trophy is just extra weight in a travel bag, and the euphoria of a championship run is nothing more than a fading echo in the locker room. Today, Alex Eala is in London. She has traded the worn, chewed-up turf of the West Midlands for the pristine, aristocratic, manicured lawns of the Queen's Club. She is stepping onto one of the most hallowed grounds in the sport, arriving at a WTA 500 event that represents a massive step up in prestige, in points, in prize money, and most importantly, in the sheer caliber of opposition. And waiting for her across the net in the round of 32 is not some eager qualifier happy to be there. Waiting for her is a former Grand Slam champion, a 37-year-old veteran who has seen every trick, every angle, and every heartbreak this sport has to offer. Waiting for her is Zhang Shuai. The question that has been echoing in my mind ever since this draw was announced is not a simple matter of who hits a better forehand or who covers the court with more lateral speed. The question is far more existential. It is a question of human psychology and physiology. Is the version of Alex Eala that just broke through a massive psychological barrier in Birmingham the exact same version that will step onto the grass at Queen's Club today? Or does that kind of extreme, peak emotional and physical expenditure leave an invisible residue behind? Does it leave a hollow space inside the athlete, a subtle depletion of nervous energy that you absolutely cannot measure in a practice session, that you cannot see in a pre-match warm-up, but that suddenly reveals itself when the score is 4-all, 30-40, and the ball is skidding at your shoelaces? We need to have a very serious conversation about what is actually happening in this matchup, because the surface details alone are wild enough to command your undivided attention, but the subterranean currents running beneath this match are what make tennis the most psychologically demanding sport on the face of the earth. Let us establish the context, because context is the absolute king in professional sports. Eala arrives in London running hotter than the surface of the sun. She has just won 5 consecutive matches in the grueling, compressed span of a single week. She did not just cruise to a title, she had to bleed for it. She culminated her Birmingham campaign in a final that demanded she come back from a set down against the dangerous Czech player Nikola Bartunkova. Eala was pushed to the absolute brink. She had to dig into reserves she perhaps did not even know she possessed, finding a way to grind out a 7-5 victory in the third and deciding set. Right now, her body, her mind, her muscle memory, they all know exactly what winning feels like. She possesses that intangible, electric aura of a player who has forgotten how to lose. Her confidence right now transcends any scouting report, any analytics dashboard, or any tactical game plan her opponents might try to formulate. But here is the glaring reality that the highlight reels and the breathless post-match interviews are completely ignoring. The transition from a WTA 125 level event in Birmingham to a premier WTA 500 event at the Queen's Club is not merely a step up in prestige, it is a violent, jarring step up in the speed of the game. Grass court tennis is not a monolith. The lawns in Birmingham, by the time Eala was playing her final on Sunday, had been subjected to 9 days of relentless competitive play. The baseline was a dust bowl. The grass had been chewed up by the footwork of dozens of players. The court had slowed down. The bounce had become slightly more predictable, slightly higher, allowing Eala the precious fractions of a second she needed to set up her heavy, dictating ground strokes. She adapted to those specific degraded conditions beautifully, showcasing a magnificent tennis IQ, but those conditions vanished the moment she got on the train to London. They no longer exist. Today, she is walking into a completely different ecosystem within the same surface family. The grass at Queen's Club is notoriously slick, impossibly quick, and obsessively manicured. It plays like a sheet of green glass. The ball does not bounce up into your strike zone. It hits the turf, it skids, and it shoots through the court, barely rising above your knees. The margins for error shrink from inches to millimeters. You are stripped of time. You are stripped of the luxury of a full, looping backswing and standing across the net, perfectly comfortable in the chaos of taking the ball incredibly early, is Zhang Shuai. Now I need to be painstakingly precise about who Zhang Shuai is in the month of June in the year 2026. Because if you simply glance at the singles rankings, if you just look at the raw data of her current singles season, you are going to be fed a wildly deceptive narrative. The name Zhang Shuai carries a gravitational weight in the locker room that a ranking in the mid-60s does not even begin to accurately represent. Yes, Zhang is 37 years old. She has been on the professional tour for the better part of 2 decades. Her singles record this year sits at 13 wins and 16 losses. That is objectively below a 500 win percentage. If you watched her just over a week ago at the French Open, you saw her lose in the first round to Anne Lee in straight sets 6-4, 6-2 in a match that barely even felt competitive by the time the final ball was struck. On paper, if you are building a purely statistical argument, she looks like a player in the twilight of her career whose body of work this season screams inconsistency and fatigue. But tennis is not played on a spreadsheet. You have to look sideways. You have to look at the entire landscape of her year to understand the danger she presents. Look at the doubles ranking. She is the number 8 doubles player on the planet. Look at the Australian Open back in January, where she and Elise Mertens reunited as a Grand Slam pairing after 4 long years apart. They did not just participate, they marched through the draw in Melbourne and immediately won the Grand Slam title. That requires an elite level of shot-making, volleying, return precision, and big match temperament. Look at the way she has played in specific spurts this year in singles. Look at her run through Merida, where she dismantled Emma Navarro, a top 30 player in the world, in straight, clinical sets. Or look at Strasbourg, just a few weeks ago. In the first round, she was dead and buried against Christina Boxa. She was down, the match was virtually over, and Zhang saved 5 match points. 5 times she stared tournament elimination in the face on the clay, and 5 times she found a way to survive, eventually reaching the quarterfinals of that event. Zhang Shuai does not die quietly. She has never died quietly. She possesses this remarkable, almost supernatural capacity to conjure magic from situations that look completely terminal. She is a survivor in the truest sense of the word. So, what we have unfolding on the grass at Queen's Club today is not a straightforward, linear story of a rising star blowing past a fading veteran. It is a collision of 2 athletes who occupy completely different stratospheres of their respective lives and careers, meeting on a surface that acts as the ultimate lie detector test in professional tennis. Grass asks you one fundamental question: how comfortable are you trusting your absolute rawest instincts when the ball is rushing at you and you have 0 time to think? Let me break down the tactical picture for you, because it is genuinely deeply fascinating. Alex Eala is left-handed. In the geometry of tennis, being left-handed is an advantage on any surface, but on a slick grass court, it transforms into an absolute unmitigated weapon of destruction. Eala's service motion naturally creates a trajectory that curves violently away from a right-handed returner's backhand on the deuce side of the court. And on the ad side, she has the ability to hit that wicked slider that jams right into the ribcage of the returner, forcing a cramped defensive block. On a surface like the Queen's Club grass, where you have maybe 1/10 of a second less reaction time than you do on a hard court or clay court, that left-handed geometry is lethal. It is a weapon that does not require brute, overwhelming physical power to be devastatingly effective. If you look at Eala's serve, it is not about piling up massive ace counts. She averages less than 1 ace per match. She is not serving at 120 miles per hour. Instead, her serve is an absolute masterclass in placement, spin, and disguise. It is about creating angles that feel slightly unnatural, slightly wrong to the returner, because the spin is mirrored from what 85% of the players on the tour produce. She is asking the returner to process a complex physics equation in the blink of an eye while the ball is skidding off the turf. Zhang Shuai, on the other hand, is the stylistic antithesis of this. Zhang has built her entire 17-year singles career on one fundamental pillar: timing. She does not overpower anyone. She never has. Standing at 5'10", she has good natural leverage, but her game lives and dies on her ability to strike the ball exceptionally early. She takes the ball on the rise, absorbing the opponent's pace, redirecting that power, and finding sharp, punishing angles. When she is on clay or a slower hard court where the ball sits up right in her strike zone and she has that extra fraction of a second to plant her feet and set up those geometries, she has historically been a nightmare to play against. But what happens when you put that specific skill set on grass? Her career record tells a very stark, very different story. Zhang is 25 and 28 on grass at the WTA main draw level across her entire career. That is a losing record, and if you narrow the lens and look at the last 52 weeks of her life, she has played exactly one grass court match at the WTA level, and she lost it. This is the detail, this specific statistical reality that keeps gnawing at the back of my mind as I look at this matchup. Zhang's singles game on grass requires her hand-eye coordination and her timing to be absolutely microscopic. Because the ball skids and stays so incredibly low, it rewards players who can bend their knees, stay balanced, absorb the pace, and redirect it without needing the extra split second that a hard court provides. When you look at Zhang's statistics this year, her breakpoint conversion rate is sitting at an extraordinary 57.7%. That number tells you a very specific story. It tells you that she creates immense pressure. It tells you that when she gets into her opponent's service games, she capitalizes. She does not let opportunities slip away. But on grass, the entire dynamic of returning shifts, holds of serve become significantly cheaper because the server's inherent advantage is drastically amplified by the speed of the court. So the question becomes, can Zhang Shuai generate those same high-pressure return opportunities against a player like Eala, who is not only serving with that tricky, disguised left-handed spin, but is also riding a massive, undeniable wave of supreme confidence? This brings me to a subject that I feel passionately about, a subject that simply does not get discussed enough in mainstream tennis analysis. I want to zoom out and talk about the invisible, heavy, crushing physical cost of winning a professional tennis tournament just 48 hours before your next event begins. The narrative is always that the champion is riding momentum. The media loves the word momentum. It sounds great. But let us look at the biological reality of what Alex Eala has just put her body through. Eala played 5 incredibly intense matches in Birmingham across a span of 6 days. That run included going the absolute distance, playing brutal 3-set matches in both the semi-final and the championship final. Think about that final against Bartunkova. Eala dropped the first set. She had to completely rewire her game plan, dig her heels into the dirt, and grind her way back into the match. She eventually prevailed 7-5 in the final set. That was not a clinical, breezy 1-hour dismissal. That was a street fight. That was a massive physical and emotional expenditure of energy. When you win a title like that, your brain floods your system with adrenaline and dopamine. That chemical cocktail masks the physical exhaustion beautifully, but it only lasts for about 24 hours. Then the reality of the tour sets in. You have to pack your bags. You travel from Birmingham down to London. You have to navigate a new city, check into a different hotel, adjust to completely different tournament facilities, eat different food, sleep in a different bed, and suddenly, the adrenaline completely evaporates. You are out on the practice courts on Monday trying to find your legs, and you are scheduled to play a high-stakes match on Tuesday. The WTA Tour is a brutally unforgiving machine in this regard. These players do not get the luxury of savoring their victories. The calendar does not care about your feelings, your fatigue, or your milestones. It simply demands that you show up and perform again. And while the popular narrative insists that Eala is riding a wave of momentum, the harsh physiological reality might be that her quads, her calves, and her shoulders remember every single inch, every single grueling rally of those 3-set matches in Birmingham far more vividly than her conscious mind does. And in a very subtle, almost insidious way, Zhang Shuai benefits tremendously from this exact dynamic. Zhang lost early at Roland Garros. She has not been grinding through deep tournament runs over the last 10 days. That means her 37-year-old body is, relatively speaking, completely fresh. She has had ample time to transition to the grass. She has had weeks to practice on the surface, to recalibrate her footwork, to tune her microscopic timing to the skid of the ball, to settle into the unique biomechanical demands of grass court tennis without carrying the heavy, leaden, residual exhaustion of deep competition in her limbs. There is something incredibly dangerous about a seasoned veteran arriving at a major tournament hungry, rested, and with a point to prove, rather than arriving satisfied and exhausted. Now, let us peel back another layer and talk about the mental and psychological landscape of this matchup, because it is layered in ways that I find utterly compelling. In Birmingham, Alex Eala did something monumental for her career. She broke through what the Filipino sports media had dubbed her Czech curse. By defeating Bartunkova in that final, Eala secured her very first victory over a player from the Czech Republic in 14 attempts since turning professional. Think about the psychological weight of that statistic. 14 times she stepped on the court against a Czech player. 14 times she shook hands at the net as the loser. That is not just a trivia fact. That is a towering, suffocating psychological barrier that had been slowly building and solidifying in her mind for 6 years. Breaking a streak like that is not merely a positive tennis result. It is a fundamental shift in a player's identity. In that final, Eala proved to herself, in the most pressure-packed environment possible, that she could finally conquer the exact archetype of player she had historically struggled against. That kind of profound internal narrative change releases something powerful in a young athlete. It unlocks a new level of self-belief. It does not just apply to future matches against Czech opponents, it fundamentally recalibrates how she processes and handles pressure in every single match she plays going forward. She has slain a massive dragon, but, and this is a massive but, there is a very well-documented psychological counterpoint to this kind of breakthrough. Ask any sports psychologist, ask any veteran coach on the tour. Immediately after an athlete achieves a massive, emotionally draining milestone, there is almost always a subconscious, subtle relaxation that follows. It is not a conscious lack of effort. Nobody at the WTA 500 level ever steps onto the court and stops trying. It is far more insidious than that. It is a fractional drop in urgency. The mountain has been climbed. The dragon is dead. The central nervous system, after operating in a state of high alert for an entire week, desperately wants to exhale. And when your body decides to exhale against a player like Zhang Shuai, you are in immediate severe danger. Zhang has played over 800 professional singles matches in her life. She is a predator who knows exactly how to read the body language of her opponent. She knows exactly how to exploit even a 1% drop in intensity. Zhang's greatest weapon in this match might not be her flat backhand down the line or her aggressive return positioning. Her greatest asset might simply be her 17 years of hard-earned wisdom telling her, this kid across the net just spent everything she had to win a title. She is still emotionally catching her breath. Make the rallies long, make her bend her knees, make her run, make her climb another mountain immediately, and see if her legs give out. Let us get granular and look at the serve dynamics more specifically, because the patterns established on serve will absolutely dictate the rhythm, the tempo, and ultimately the outcome of this match. If we look at the data from this season, Alex Eala's first serve percentage hovers around 64.9%. Her win rate on her first serve is approximately 60.9%. If you are a tennis purist, you know those numbers are solid, they are respectable, but they are not dominant. They tell a very clear story. Eala does not walk up to the baseline and blast her opponents off the court with pure, unadulterated serving power. She is not Elena Rybakina or Arina Sabalenka. What Eala does masterfully is use her serve as an opening chess move. She uses that left-handed spin to pull the opponent off the court, keeping the ball in play on her own terms, and then she aggressively hunts for the first opportunity to use her heavy left-handed forehand to dictate the baseline rallies. On grass, where rallies are naturally truncated, where points are often decided in the first 3 or 4 shots, Eala's ability to take absolute control of the point early, immediately after the serve, becomes magnified in importance. Then you look at Zhang Shuai. At first glance, the statistics present a paradox. Zhang is actually slightly more reliant on aces than Eala, averaging around 2.1 aces per match compared to Eala's 0.8. This seems deeply counterintuitive given their respective reputations and playing styles. But you have to factor in the physics of Zhang's height. At 5'10", Zhang is able to generate a much steeper downward angle into the service box. She hits a very flat, penetrating first serve, and she has maintained reasonable serving speeds throughout the entirety of her career. The catastrophic vulnerability in Zhang's game, however, is her second serve. On a grass court, a weak, floating second serve is a death sentence. It gets identified and violently attacked immediately. And Zhang's win percentage on her second serve points this year is a very troubling 56%, a number that places her in the bottom third of the entire WTA tour. That specific vulnerability is going to be exposed, targeted, and relentlessly attacked if Eala has the energy to step inside the baseline and get aggressive on the return. And this is where the left-handed dynamic creates a highly specific, totally asymmetrical tactical nightmare that might not be obvious to the casual viewer. When Eala is returning serve on the ad side of the court, which, from Zhang's perspective as the server, is the deuce side, Eala's massive dictating forehand is loaded, cocked, and ready for a ball that is traveling directly into her absolute favorite power zone. If Zhang misses her first serve, she has to hit a second serve into the box, knowing that a left-handed forehand is waiting to crush it. Most right-handed players hit through that ad side with a backhand return, which is naturally a more defensive, blocking shot. Eala hits it with her dominant weapon. That single asymmetry completely alters the risk-reward calculation for Zhang's serve placement on every single crucial point of the match. Zhang will have to take bigger risks on her second serve to avoid Eala's forehand, which could lead to a spike and double faults. For the millions of fans who will be tuning in to watch this unfold, let me quickly address the practical logistics. The HSBC Championships at Queen's Club is a massive event, and the broadcast arrangements are extensive. If you are watching from the UK, the tournament is deeply embedded in the LTA's broadcast partnerships, ensuring widespread coverage. For the international audience, WTA TV and the Tennis Channel are your primary destinations for premium WTA 500 coverage. And for the fans in the Philippines, and make no mistake, there will be millions of incredibly passionate Filipino fans tracking every single point of this match given Eala's soaring profile as a national icon. One Sports has been absolutely magnificent in providing consistent live coverage of her matches. You can track the live, point-by-point data through the official WTA app, through SofaScore, and directly via the LTA's tournament portal. The match is slated for this Tuesday, June 9th, though the exact time she walks onto the grass will depend heavily on the length of the matches scheduled before hers. But I want to pull us back into the deep analysis of this matchup, because there is one final, incredibly poignant dimension to this story that I have yet to fully explore. We must talk about the dual life of Zhang Shuai. In this twilight phase of her career, Zhang is by all statistical measures primarily a doubles. The absolute highest peaks of her tennis in 2026 have come when she has been sharing the court with Elise Mertens. They won the Australian Open. They navigated the pressure of a Grand Slam draw together. There is an immense comforting chemistry that exists between two elite doubles players who implicitly trust each other's movements, instincts, and shot selection. But singles is a vastly different psychological beast. Singles tennis is the most solitary, isolating endeavor in professional sports. When you are standing on that baseline, there is no partner to physically tap gloves with after you double fault. There is no one standing at the net to intercept a passing shot when your legs feel heavy. There is no one to look you in the eye and give you a reassuring nod that says, "Shake it off, I've got you on this next point." You are trapped on an island of your own making, exposed to the scrutiny of the crowd and the relentless pressure of your opponent. At 37 years old, after a career that has been nothing short of extraordinary, after making millions of dollars, after securing Grand Slam glory, does Zhang Shuai still possess the raw, burning, singles-specific hunger required to suffer on the court? Does she still have the desire to grind through the early, unglamorous rounds of a grass court tournament against a 21-year-old phenom who just tasted championship glory in front of an adoring crowd? Does the fire still burn hot enough to make her chase down drop shots when her lungs are burning? I genuinely believe that it does. And I will tell you exactly why I believe that. You just have to look at what she did in Strasbourg 3 weeks ago. Saving 5 match points in a first-round match on clay against Christina Busha is not a statistical anomaly, it is a profound revelation of character. Players who have lost their competitive fire do not do that. Players who are just showing up to collect a first-round paycheck and go back to the hotel do not dig themselves out of a massive hole in a second-set tiebreak and then fight tooth and nail to win the deciding set 7-5. That victory in Strasbourg was not just a tennis match, it was an act of pure, stubborn, visceral defiance. It was Zhang Shuai screaming to the locker room that she is not done yet. She followed that up by beating Diane Parry in the very next round. The ultimate result of the tournament is secondary. The point is the fight. The fight is still there. The spirit has not eroded one bit, even if the day-to-day consistency of her ground strokes occasionally wavers. So, when we synthesize all of these complex, swirling variables, the physics of the grass, the left-handed geometry, the biological exhaustion, the psychological exhale, the veteran's pride, where exactly does this leave us as we anticipate Tuesday's clash at Queen's Club? I firmly believe that the entire architecture of this match will be established and potentially decided in the first 4 games. I am not talking about the first set, I am talking about the first 10 to 15 minutes of court time. If Alex Eala can walk out of the tunnel, ignore the heaviness in her legs, impose her left-handed serving patterns immediately, and get an early look at break points on Zhang's serve, the match could accelerate away from the veteran with terrifying speed. Young, supremely talented players who are surfing a massive wave of confidence tend to be devastating frontrunners. Once they secure an early lead, they relax, their shoulders drop, and their immense natural talent takes over, compounding the advantage until the opponent is suffocated. But if Zhang Shuai can draw a line in the sand early, if she can hold her serve comfortably in those crucial opening games, if she can hit her spots, flatten out her returns, force Eala into long, grueling 8 or 9 shot rallies, and utterly refuse to let the match turn into a quick procession, then something deeply fascinating and highly unpredictable begins to happen right around the middle of the first set. If it gets to 3-all or 4-all, the residual euphoria of the Birmingham title will begin to evaporate into the damp London air. The physical reality of playing 6 matches in 8 days will start to settle into Eala's muscles like lead. The sheer magnitude of the occasion, the bigger stadium at Queen's Club, the brighter lights, the heightened expectations, the weight of the WTA 500 status will start to weigh differently on the shoulders of the 21-year-old compared to the 37-year-old. And in that specific high-pressure crucible, Zhang's 17 years of accumulated experience transforms into its own unique, immovable form of momentum. Now, purely from a stylistic standpoint, the slick grass of Queen's Club should naturally favor Eala's game. That is not a bold prediction, it is simply an objective observation about the geometry of her shots and the physics of surface speed. The court heavily favors the player whose patterns are more inherently aggressive, the player who is looking for the first strike, the player who can dictate the point immediately after the serve. But you can never discount the fact that Zhang Shuai has spent over 2 decades of her life figuring out exactly how to dismantle, neutralize, and frustrate players who hit the ball significantly harder than she does. Her tennis IQ is in the absolute upper echelon of the tour. She is a master at reading the microscopic shifts in an opponent's footwork. She anticipates patterns, she adjusts her positioning mid-match. She finds incredibly subtle ways to make her opponents deeply uncomfortable, by taking pace off the ball, by throwing in a low slice, by altering the rhythm of the rally, and by absolutely refusing to engage in the heavy baseline firefights that her younger opponents desperately crave. She will force Eala to generate her own pace from low, skidding balls, testing the young player's patience and shot tolerance on every single point. As we prepare for the umpire to call time and for the first ball to be struck, I want to leave you with a thought that transcends the simple binary of winning and losing. I want you to think about what this specific match represents in the grand, overarching architecture of 2 completely different tennis careers intersecting for a brief moment in time. For Alex Eala, this match is a prologue. This is the absolute beginning of what should be a long, illustrious career of arriving at major WTA 500 events on grass, not as a hopeful underdog, but as a seeded powerhouse or a terrifying, dangerous floater in the draw. She is only 21 years old. The trajectory of her development is skyrocketing upward. The championships at Wimbledon begin in just 3 short weeks. Every single ball she hits, every single pressure moment she navigates at Queen's Club feeds directly into that massive, career-defining preparation cycle. For Eala, a victory here is not just about advancing to the round of 16. It is about validation. It is tangible, undeniable proof that her magical run in Birmingham was not a fluke, not a one-off alignment of the stars. It is proof that the mature, aggressive version of her game that thrives on the grass can seamlessly travel. It proves her game translates across different venues, across completely different tiers of competition, evolving from the relative comfort of a 125-level event directly into the intense, unforgiving scrutiny of a premier 500-level tournament. For Zhang Shuai, the stakes are completely different, wrapped in a sense of poignant finality. This tournament might very well be one of her final campaigns on the professional grass court circuit. When you are a 37-year-old singles player on the WTA Tour, every single summer is borrowed time. Every match is a gift, and every tournament could be a farewell. But make absolutely no mistake, Zhang is not at Queen's Club for a nostalgic farewell tour. She is not here to wave to the crowd and collect a paycheck. That Australian Open doubles championship she won in January was a loud, defiant declaration that she can still execute at a world-class championship level when all the pieces fall into place. The ultimate question for Zhang today is a question of physical endurance and singular isolated belief. Can her aging body and her deeply tested belief system summon that same championship level of execution when she is entirely alone? Can she do it on grass, which is universally recognized as the most punishing, unforgiving surface in the sport? And can she do it against an opponent who is 16 years younger and riding the absolute most spectacular wave of form she has ever experienced in her professional life? This is the beauty of the sport. We have 2 completely different careers, 2 completely different lifetimes of experience, colliding on one rectangular patch of lawn in West London on a Tuesday afternoon. Whatever unfolds out there today, I urge you not to just glance at the scoreboard. Pay close, obsessive attention to the minute details. The magic of this matchup will not be found in the final scoreline. It will be found in the margins. Watch the exact placement of Alex Eala's feet during the first 3 return games. Is she bouncing on her toes, attacking the ball, or is she sluggishly leaning backward? Watch Zhang Shuai's court positioning. Is she bravely hugging the baseline, taking the ball early to steal time, or is the pace of Eala's shots forcing her to drift deeper and deeper behind the line? Watch the subtle shifts in their body language the very first time a tight deuce game doesn't go their way. Watch the way they look at their coaching boxes. Watch the way they breathe between points. The scoreboard at the end of the day will coldly dictate who advances and who packs their bags. But the true story, the human drama, the psychological warfare that makes professional tennis the most endlessly fascinating, agonizing, and beautiful sport in the world, lives entirely in those tiny breathing margins. The stage is set, the grass is perfect, the players are ready. I will see you on the other side of the match.